The Milken Institute Asia Summit is underway in Singapore, where global leaders are tackling trade tensions, shifting alliances, and the race towards a more multipolar world. And right at the crossroads of these shifts is Indonesia, Southeast Asia's largest economy. Our Julie Yu is standing by with more. Julie, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Paul, thank you so much. Indonesia has been making headlines recently, signing a major trade deal with Washington in July, locking in agreements with the EU, and just last week with Canada, and at the same time managing its deep economic ties with China. My next guest says Jakarta's strategy is dating everybody as long as relationships bring benefit and respect. Joining me now is Dino Patti Djalal, founder and chairman of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, and he was also the former Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Ambassador to the U.S. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador.
It's great to be here, Julie.
Thank you. You recently described Indonesia as geopolitically polygamous. I wonder, what's the strategy behind this flexible posture?
Well, we are in a sweet spot now, in the sense that we are a relevant middle power. We don't have any enemies. We're not involved in any conflict with any other country. And we have strategic autonomy, which means we are free to date, right? To date any other countries. Other countries may have conflicts, but we're not part of those conflicts. In fact, we have strategic partnership with the US, as well as with China, as well as with Russia. So it's really a new and exciting environment, strategic environment for us, where, as President Prabowo has said, we are enemies to none and friends to all, right? And of course, not only Indonesia are in that position. You know, the Filipinos have said the same thing, the Thais and the Malaysians and so on. But it's a good time for Indonesian foreign policy. Yeah.
Since you mentioned the U.S., so let me ask you about the trade deal that's been signed recently in July. It happened under massive pressure from Washington, I understand. But how confident are you that this trade deal is stable given the unpredictability of U.S. trade policies?
Well, the 19% that was agreed temporarily between President Prabowo and President Trump will need to be finalized. So the two sides are negotiating. I think the next round is coming in October, and we hope they will come up with a number and terms that are mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial is the key word. It cannot be imposed on us, and we hope that the deal will cover trade only, because once you link it to non-trade issues or even geopolitical issues, it becomes complicated, right? So I hope the two sides will come up with a good deal, because Indonesia and the U.S. does have this comprehensive partnership that will need to be renewed and revitalized under the Trump administration, and whether or not we get a good deal will be a measure of how healthy that strategic partnership will be.
Work in progress. Yes. Since you are talking about Washington, you earlier said that U.S. retrenchment isn't necessarily a bad thing. It actually gives space to middle powers. How is Indonesia preparing to fill in that gap?
Well, I want to be clear about what middle power means, because it means different things to different people. But there are great powers, right, and small powers, and there are middle powers, countries that have, that are like in boxing, like middleweight, right, the capacity and also the ambition. They have the economic, diplomatic, military, and technological capacity to do more, to shape the regional and world order. And that's where Indonesia is. And in our view, as the world transitions into the next world order, and we don't know what that next world order looks like, the role of the middle powers in the global south as well as in the global north will be critical in shaping that world, right? Determining the texture and the shape of that world order. So I think Indonesia is quite optimistic that in this transitioning world, we can create more space for cooperation with a whole bunch of middle powers. And this is seen in the last 10 or 11 months. Our expanded relationship with Australia, with Turkey, with India, with France, with Canada, as you just alluded to, with Germany, with EU, and so on. In other words, as some countries see the rivalries and the narrowing of dialogue, we see the other way around. We see the opposite. We see expanded space for cooperation and more opportunities to engage.
You mentioned EU and Canada, the recent deals that Indonesia have signed. How significant are these two countries as a counterweight to US and China?
Well, significant because they are related, in my view, to the surprising tariff slap from the US. But it was surprising to us. And the EU also had the same problem. So the impact was felt immediately by Indonesia and EU, which after 9 years of negotiation did not produce anything. And suddenly, with the tariffs slapped on us by the United States, that was an impetus for us. Let's wrap this up. So surprisingly, 9 years of negotiation that was rather stagnant now has been finally finalized. Yeah. So a lot of a lot of alignments and realignments are taking place.
Absolutely. Let's talk about China. It's already Indonesia's biggest trading partner, but you said that it's not yet a threat. So I wonder if there's factors or developments that could shift China from being a strategic partner to a source of challenge.
Well, keep in mind, for Indonesia, some time ago in the 60s and 70s and the first half of the 80s, China was a threat, right? We froze diplomatic relations, and that changed since the late 80s. Relations improved. There was a lot more substance to the relationship, a lot of engagements, and trust grew out of it, to the point that Indonesia and China have become comprehensive and strategic partners, which is the highest level of diplomatic engagement for Indonesia. But Indonesia, being a middle power devoted to strategic autonomy, we are never too comfortable being too close to one power. We always have to hedge. Right? The same thing when we had that relationship with the United States. We always want to keep options, right? So with China, I think the relationship is very good, but it does have challenges. Public perception in Indonesia towards China on certain issues, on labor, Chinese labor, for example, is problematic. Yeah, there were some other issues. There's the issue of South China Sea, right? And so on. But I think the relationship is resilient enough at the moment to make sure the relationship is resilient despite all these challenges.
So speaking of resilience, Indonesia is also very active in participating in multiple major economic groups like not only ASEAN, but RCEP, BRICS, and it's also exploring being a member of the CPTPP as well. Critics might say, is Indonesia spreading itself too thin in terms of resources? What would you say to them?
I think it's like this. Now the world is a lot more complex and a lot of actions everywhere. In Africa, Latin America, Middle East, Europe, everywhere there's actions in different ways. And for us, it's important to have our foot on different bases. So we are in G20, that's great. We are in ASEAN. ASEAN is number one, obviously. But we are now putting our foot in BRICS as well, right? We are now getting into OECD, right? And CPTPP, yes, that's the next base for us to put our foot in. In our view, it allows us to play more games. right, and extract more opportunities. So that's for us the game. How strategic autonomy translates into these multiple alignments, and the key, Julie, is balance, right? I know when we joined BRICS, a lot of countries are nervous. Indonesia, we switch. No, we didn't switch. We just added more base, right? And the question now is how do we strategize or maximize the use of these bases for our national interests.
Very exciting and strategic time for Indonesia. Thank you so much for your insights, Ambassador. And I've been speaking to Dino Patti Djalal, founder and chairman of Foreign Policy Committee of Indonesia.